All right, Michael Bird's 100 Ideas That Changed Art. Let's get through them. I don't think there's going to be 100 on this, but maybe we'll come close. Okay, so this is a wild pig from Indonesia. It's 43,500 BCE, and it's quite a difference between that and the animals in the Luxor caves. When I was in college, we would just talk about 15,000 years ago being the sort of ceiling, and it seems like every day there's some sort of change, some new discovery of art that goes even back further now these days than even the wild pig. And it makes sense that they would make images of objects around them, including animals. But there's not many examples of human beings in these early Paleolithic caves and other sites throughout the world. Okay, what about fired clay? So this is a good example. This is Venus of Dolny Vestinice, 29,000 BCE to 25,000 BCE. So at some point they figured out how to fire clay in various different places in the world. And it's interesting, a lot of the sculptures from the Paleolithic period are of women, leading some people to believe that maybe women were in charge. I've never seen evidence of that because there's no written language from the Paleolithic period. Okay, and then this is a red figure vase. The way that you make it is the slip goes on the negative space, and then they don't put slip on the positive space except for to delineate muscles and such. And this is a great example of a Greek vase that's beloved throughout the world. The Greeks had various kinds of vases, and this is one of the big ones in which there would have been wine, and then other vases that would have been used to draw the wine from the larger one, the larger crater. And then always trying to keep it multicultural. So now we're looking at something from Tenochtitlan in Central America, and this is a life-size eagle warrior, and it's also fired clay. It's pretty impressive. All right, what about the land as material? So this is the Uffington horse in England, and the big question, of course, is how did they know to make it the way that they did if they didn't have aerial views? Unlike today, of course. But this is from 1380 to 550 BCE. And then let's go to a serpent's mound. Yeah. In Ohio. And a lot of these, of course, were destroyed with the advancement of European Americans into the Midwest. But some of them were actually preserved, as we see here. All right, what about statues? Who doesn't like a good statue? So Ramses II was quite the egotistical person. He had a lot of sculptures made of him, and this goes back to 1180 BCE in the Egyptian ancient culture. I think this is part of this new museum that just recently opened up in Cairo. And then you've got Marcus Aurelius, who would have been a Roman emperor. And here he is on a horse, so it's an equestrian sculpture. Gotta like that. And it looks like it's easy to sculpt something like that, but it's not. I mean, to make that large of a sculpture, first of all, and then to have it look so realistic and in emotion, it's quite a feat. And then here's something more modern. This is David Mock's Silverback 2007-2008. Okay, let's keep going. And then here is Candidate Wiley's Rumors of War. Now, this was something fairly new for him to go into sculpture. He was known more as a painter for a long time. All right, let's do wall paintings. So this is the Annunciation. This is the time period in Christian art in which It's very important to present the history of Christianity through visual sources because most of the population that was going to these Catholic churches were illiterate. So here you have Gabriel asking Mary if she'd be willing to be impregnated by the Holy Spirit and give birth to the baby Jesus. And it's an early Renaissance fresco. And one of the ways that you can tell is there's not that gold leaf that we expect from earlier periodization in Renaissance art. And you can see that there's use of central point perspective, all lines receding in the distance in parallel fashion in a way that looks fairly realistic. And then here you have a mural being painted. So it's a mural within a mural, so to speak. This is Diego Rivera's The Making of the Fresco, showing the building of the city. And this one is, I believe, in San Francisco. And, of course, Diego Rivera was one of the greatest fresco artists, muralists of all time. And he spent some time in the United States, and this is a result of one of those trips. Okay, let's keep going. All right, scaling up. What happens when we make something very, very large? Here is an Olmec colossal head from 900 BCE. And it's quite large. And you see these quite a bit in Mesoamerica, actually. Beautiful sculptures that are very, very big in scale. Okay. And then here's Klaus Oldenburg and his wife, Van Bruggen, with House Ball. And it's always fun to look at the conceptual pieces before the actual sculpture is made. And you can see that looks like there's some differences in between what they originally thought they were going to make with this one. And this one I think is fairly recent, House Ball 1996. So Klaus Oldenburg, of course, is a pop artist who made giant soft and hard sculptures, and most cities have Klaus Oldenburg. Denver has the dustpan and sweeper, and of course we have Springbridge with Cherry, and the Kansas City has the shuttlecocks. So it's almost as if to be seen as an art city, you have to have a Klaus Oldenburg in your backyard. And then here is Murakami's The 500 Harats, 2015. And this is a little bit of a departure from him. He's looking into Shintoism, and also the large scale is definitely something that he's working with more and more. Okay, now let's go to narrative. So this is the Column of Trajan. I've seen it recently. It's amazing. The whole surface is covered by narrative that is glorifying the rule of Trajan, the Roman emperor, and it comes from 113 CE, so now we're in the Common Era. And then this one is an interesting one. This is seen from the French campaign of 1814, but the painting itself was done in 1826. There's so many different from the Napoleonic times, and then even afterwards, there's a lot of turmoil in French history. And this is showing one of those times in which the peasantry is being assaulted. Okay, so that's narrative. And then what about body as surface? So there's a group of women in the 1960s, Hannah Wilke being one of the most famous of them, who use their bodies as part of their art. And this is called Scarification Objects 74 to 82. Okay, and then you have here Marilyn Minter's painting Orange Crush, 2009. And she's grown in stature, wow, over the last, I would say 20 years. Everybody wants a Marilyn Minter painting because and part of it is because it's photorealism, but it's also, she also does some really interesting things with her images. Okay, what about the nude? So we have the most famous nude in all of art history, the Venus of Urbino, 1538. It's one that everybody sort of launches from, including Monet, who else? Ingres for sure, others. It's a very it's definitely a piece that has influenced all that has come after it. And then here is Brooke Boothby by Joseph Wright of Derby. It's just it's a painting of I've always sort of paused with a man fully clothed out in the forest, looking on and posing in a way that you would expect from other folks. So yeah, it's a curious painting to say the least. All right, what about propaganda? We know that Napoleon did not cure people from the plague in the Middle East, but he's shown doing that here by Jean Gros. And so this is from 1804, and Napoleon understood propaganda more than anybody else, probably in his time, and probably even after or before. He had a whole slew of artists who typically would paint images of him, and we still have a lot of those images today in museums. And then here's some propaganda. So this is John McNaughton's Legacy of Hope, and check out the individuals who are supporting Trump. It's an interesting cast of characters. One that is could be critiqued. That's for sure. I'll just say that. Okay, let's go to Lost Wax Casting. So this is a Yoruba's head of Ife from the 14th and early 15th century. And basically you start with clay, then you put wax over the clay, and then you put clay again, and then you burn out the wax, and then you pour the bronze into the negative space that remains. And lost wax casting process is one that's used still today a lot. So it's something that's developed, at least in Africa, in the 14th and early 15th centuries, but it's still used today. Excuse me. And then you have Louise Bourgeois' spider couple. For some reason, she was obsessed with spiders. If you ever see a sculpture of a spider, you know it's her work. You cannot look at the label and just go up and say, it's a Bourgeois. Okay, what about architectural sculptures? Sculptures that hold up buildings, in this case. And so this is the porch of the Erechtheion, which is on the Acropolis, which looks over Athens, and it's one of the temples there. And these caryatids are columns in the shape of women. And that's not actually the original ones, I found out. Actually, the originals are in the Acropolis Museum, because weather would make these deteriorate at a higher rate. So even though they look original, they're not original. And that's one of the best examples of architectural sculpture for sure. And then here is the Last Judgment at the Church of Lazare in, I think, definitely in France. And you can see the Last Judgment happening on the right in particular, where they're weighing souls and taking people out of their graves and weighing them. And this is part of what's called a tympanum, which would be over the portal into a cathedral. And this would be probably from the Romanesque time period, I think. So not exactly in the time period of the Gothic. All right, let's keep going. Here is a frame that's kind of playing with the whole idea of frames. So this is another Annunciation scene. It's in Grisey, so it looks like it's a It's a sculpture, but it's not. He's making the actual painting sort of lift out in a way. And this is by, of course, the very famous painter Jan van Eyck. And the picture plane is the framing of a three-dimensional world. And so both of these sculptures are definitely playing outside the picture plane on both the panels, which gives it that sense of illusionism. Okay, and then you've got icons. So we're used to artists being given license to do whatever they want with their images, but the icon is a different sort of system where you're supposed to exactly copy what's in front of you, the icon. Otherwise, they don't believe the icon has the ability to be a conduit into the spiritual world. So it's a little hard for our minds to roll around that, but that's what happens with the creation of icons. It's an exact copy of the ones that come before it. And this is usually in an Orthodox church. Okay, what do we got here? All right, mosaics. Oh, yes. So here we've got Ravenna, the Apse of Saint Apollinaire in Classe A. There's tesserae. There's 549 tesserae that make up this mosaic, and the tesserae are made of glass, pottery, and stone. Oh, I love a good miniature. So here is an example from Persia. And remember, if we haven't talked about it before, that Persia and Mughal India do have human forms in their art as opposed to other areas of the Islamic world. And so in this case, we've got calligraphy, we've got a little bit of vegetation, and not too much geometry, I don't think. But yeah, those all come together, those motifs, to form a lot of Islamic art. And then here's a very small miniature by Nicholas Hillard. He was seen as the best painter of the Tudor period. And this goes back to 1577, when miniatures were very, very popular. Okay, and then you've got mathematics. So here again, central point perspective is being used. All lines receding to distance in parallel fashion. So it makes it look as though they're standing in a space that you can understand. And this is by, where are we at? Yeah, Piero della Francesca. This is the Flagellation, late 1450s. So we're talking about almost to the High Renaissance time period. So this would be sort of, isn't probably a term, but it's sort of the middle of the Renaissance. It's not early, it's not high, and so it's just right smack in the middle. And and the men seem to be talking without really recognizing what's going on in the background, which makes it so strange. All right. And then the sketch, which is always very important. A lot of sketches, of course, are preliminary undertakings for large paintings, and they weren't that collected for a very, very long time. But recently there's been a lot of drawing shows, and museums are opening up their drawing collections more than they used to in the past. And this is from Annie Putaguk. She is First Nations person. She's an indigenous woman, and known for her drawings with colored pencil. And this is 3 generations, 2004, 2005, and then I think I have another one too. Yeah, Man on the Radio. Okay. Then what about anatomy? What about not human anatomy, but actually horse anatomy? So yeah, this is George Stubbs, the most famous artist of horses in art history for sure. And he goes back to the 1700s in England. Okay, so this is an example of a cabinet of curiosity. It's a precursor to museums. And It usually includes objects that you'd see in a natural history museum and objects that you would see in a national gallery. And they were private collections of very rich and adventuresome individuals. And so that's kind of fun to look at the first kind of collections that were going on in human history, as far as what then later becomes a museum. And then this is Peggy Guggenheim, known for her incredible collection of particularly the abstract expressionists and the color field painters, folks like Joan Mitchell, Helen Frankenthaler, and then the color field painters like Agnes Martin and Rothko. And then here is her gallery in Venice, the Peggy Guggenheim collection. I'd love to see it at some point. It's supposed to be spectacular. And then here are Swiss Beats and Alicia Keys, who had a show actually very, very recently at MIA. A couple of our students were involved. And they are the premier collectors of African American art in the United States. And their collection is outstanding. Okay, and then you have academies of art. Those kind of develop in the late 1700s. And as you can see, it's just a lot of men. Even at this point, though, I believe the Royal Academy, I think it's in England, this particular one, did have 2 women members, but I don't think that they're in the painting. Okay, and then what about art dealing or owning a gallery? Well, this is Marianne Abraham, who had her first gallery in Seattle since 2012. I'm always interested in the gallery world. Maybe not as much as other people, but yeah, definitely interested in it. And then what about paints in tubes? This is a huge thing. So because of the Industrial Revolution, they're able to develop the technology so that you can put finished paint with organic substances in a tube, and therefore you can go out in plein air, as you see here. You can go out into nature and paint on your easel, as opposed to having your assistant grind the organic material, put it with mix it with oil or mix it with egg or whatever happens to be that you're mixing. And so also these colors that were coming out of the tubes, a lot of them were chemically made, so they're brand new colors that people hadn't seen before. So this adds to the nuance in painting in the late 19th century. All right. Photography changes everything. So here is an early photograph, 1857. The first photographs come around in the 1830s, I believe. And it changes everything, because if you can create an image that later you're able to develop within, a couple of hours, then why necessarily is it important anymore for art to be all about being realistic and showing what's in front of you? And so it changes the way that art is defined, and it also creates this new artistic medium that really develops in the 19th century, and now we have it full bloom in the 21st century. And this is an example of a great photographic series. This is Carrie Mae Weems' The Kitchen Table series, which is talking about rituals and culture around tables in African American life. Okay, what about art colonies? This one was not very successful. This is Stone City, Iowa. Grant Wood was a part of it. I always like looking at Grant Wood's stylized trees. I also like how he does corn, but so this was an attempt by some what were called regionalists who celebrated yeoman farmer life during the Depression. their effort to create some sort of stability in an artist colony in Iowa. And then this is Mark Bradford, one of my favorite artists of all time. And here he is in the studio. This was called Pickett's Charge, and it takes up the whole third floor of the Hirshhorn Museum in D.C. And it's made of found materials. It's one of the largest works I've ever seen before. And what I like about him is that he gives fellowships and grants to younger artists, gives them studio space. Because he himself struggled as an artist for quite a long time before he was had his sort of breakout years. And now his work is part of the Obama Presidential Library building. The entranceway has a very large work by Mark Bradford. And here he is doing one of his performance pieces. So he's very tall, very thin. And he's in a hoop skirt that's the colors of the LA Lakers, and he's trying to dunk the ball. It's one of his most famous, performance art pieces. Usually he's known for his 2D works, but this is pretty funny. Okay, now we're looking at the unconscious. Yeah, we got to talk about the unconscious, the Freudian worlds. The realm of dreams and such. And this is Remedios Varo's exploration of the sources of the Orinoco River in 1959. So she's one of these surrealists that has become much more well-known as of late, because we're looking more at women artists, as we always should have before, and we're also, I think most people are interested in a little bit of surrealism at least. All right, and then you have collage, and Hannah Hoke is a Dada artist who works with various different sources for her images, and she's really the inventor, along with John Hartfield, of the photo collage, and I like this one quite a bit. And then here's some more collage by Raoul Desnives. Here he is in his studio, 2019. Very, very decorative, lots and lots of different textures in his works, and I was lucky enough to see parts of one of his shows recently. Okay, now let's talk about abstract art. So here you have Kandinsky, a Russian, doing abstract art in 1913. And most people used to say that he's really one of the first to do abstract art, but we'll talk about that in a couple seconds. Now we have a new leader in that. And then you have this group of what were called suprematists. So they were a group of artists from Russia during actually, because it's 1915, during Tsarist Russia, who were experimenting with abstraction on a very high level. And Malevich is the most famous supremativist for sure. And then you have this Swedish woman, Hilma af Klint, who's been recently discovered, even though this is a work from 1907. There was a big show at the Guggenheim about 5 years ago that kind of reintroduced her to the art world, and now we think that she's really the first abstractionist by a couple of years on Kandinsky. And then we've got installation works. So this is Waste Not by Zhang Dong, and it has 10,000 objects that are related to his mother, I believe. And then how about expressing inner states? So going back to that whole idea of photography changing everything. So now we're interested in the inner psychology of the artist, and who better to talk about that with than Van Gogh. And here's 6 different self-portraits. He ranks right up there with Rembrandt, another Dutch artist, as far as many self-portraits as he did. And there's different moods, there's different interiority in these paintings, and worth a look. Oh, shoot. So we accidentally skipped over Yoko Ono's Cut piece, which is a very famous performance art piece where she invites people to cut off her clothes on stage. So that's an important one. And then we've got Moving Images. Here's Isaac Julian's, let's see, Baltimore, which is the story of Frederick Douglass, in a multi-channeled installation video piece. And then you also have... Oh, okay. Oh, that's where it was. It was at Victoria Moreau, the gallery. And then he's also got the Lessons of the Hour, North Star. Okay, now we're talking about conceptual art. This is a very, very famous piece. This is David Hammons' Blizzard Ball for Sale from New York City, 1983. And then you've got this one, which was a David Hammons piece that's outside the new Whitney Museum of Art, and this is called Day's End, and it's in honor of Matta Clark, and he cut 5 openings into the Pier 52 shed that formerly occupied the site. Okay, and then we're going to do a little bit of street art if Sully holds up. So this is Basquiat's Untitled. It went for $110.5 million in 2017. One of the most important artists of the late 20th century, tragically died very, very young, and his paintings are amazing. Oftentimes dealing with musical history and just things that he would see on the street. And here's Swoon in her studio. So she makes these really large prints and puts them out in the public. And then this is all about globalization. So this is the Sky Ladder, and this artist tried this Sky Ladder with fireworks a couple of different times, and then finally did it in his hometown and was successful with it, going all the way up to the end balloon there, as you can see. And then last but not least, the internet. And this is a work by Cao Fei, who is a contemporary Chinese artist, and she created her art within RMB City, a Second Life city planning. And she created her own avatar that makes the work, which is China Tracy. So using video games to create and store your art. She doesn't do that anymore, but it was pretty radical when she did it back in the day. Okay, we did it.